What is not working about the Broadway going experience, and how can we fix it? Hey friends, if you're new here, my name is Katharine Quinn. I am a 30-something living in New York City, and I work on Broadway. Last year I worked on the shows Shooked and How to Dance in Ohio. This year I am working on The Great Gatsby on Broadway, other shows TBD. As always, the YouTube family is the first to know about it, so click that subscribe button so that you don't miss a thing. All right, so this is an ongoing series that I am doing. I did a big survey on my Instagram at It's Katharine Quinn. Follow me there, and on TikTok, same handle. So I did a giant survey with 500 people asking what Broadway is doing right, what Broadway is doing wrong, and how we can fix it. Some information first about the demographics of the survey. So about 500 people did this survey. 11% of these folks are based in New York City, the remainder outside of New York. The biggest demographic is 18 to 24-year-olds, then 25 to 35, then 13 to 17, and then 35 to 44. So this definitely skews younger, which honestly I think is really exciting because for me that's an indicator of what we are going to be wanting in the future, the direction the industry should be moving in. The respondents were 60% female, 72% of respondents had seen These Are Our Theater fans, and for me this feels like it is an underserved market. So I'm really excited to learn from these folks. If you responded to this survey, thank you so much for doing so. I'll have more surveys in the future. Again, follow me on Instagram. And I think we should unpack. So the reason why I do these surveys is I'm a big nerd, and also I work in Broadway marketing. One of my whys working in theater, regardless of whether I'm directing and choreographing or working in marketing or helping the writing team or whatever facet of the industry I'm in, I want more people to come see Broadway shows. 8 out of 10 Broadway shows do not recoup their investment, or at least that was true pre-pandemic, and I have a hunch that it's even worse numbers now. We have a very high churn rate in Broadway shows, meaning shows are closing rapidly, new things are coming in rapidly, and its staying power of Broadway shows is tricky. This makes it really difficult for tourists to know what is even on offer because they may have heard of Limpika, but it's already closed by the time they come to the city. What I want to do is there's sort of a pervasive thought in the industry that you need to compete against the other shows, and there's not enough audiences for all of us to sustain the 35 Broadway shows that are currently open. I personally don't believe that is or should be the case. Times Square sees approximately 400,000 tourists every single day. If we were to fill all 41 Broadway theaters, our capacity would be 38,000 people per performance. So all we have to do is capture 1/10 of the folks who are already in the neighborhood and get them to come see our Broadway show. So for me, it's how can we invite more people into the Broadway experience, not how can we beg, borrow, and steal from other audiences. So when I'm doing these surveys, it's in an effort to better understand what it is that people want, what's working well on Broadway, and how we can improve the Broadway experience. With that in mind, this video is all about why does the Broadway going experience suck? And that's very harsh. Let's be clear. Broadway is the love of my life. I love going to see a Broadway show. However, my patience for the Broadway experience and my own Broadway show-going experiences have not been as favorable as they were, at least the way I remember growing up. So I'm interested to unpack why that is and to unpack if other people feel the same way. The final thing I'm going to say is that my company is called And That's Showbiz. You can follow us also on YouTube and every other platform where we share industry insider information. We do roundtables, we do interviews, and this is also, it just is not Katharine Quinn facing content. And it's also what I run my social media and marketing business on Broadway under. So if you're interested in checking that out, check it out. Okay, here is what folks are saying does not work on Broadway right now for the Broadway going experience. So like the experience of getting to the theater. Why does the show going experience suck? Number 1, seats on Broadway. If you aren't aware, our Broadway theaters are beautiful, they're historic, and they're also 100 years old. Those seats were made for smaller bodies. Therefore, those seats are uncomfy. Also, our theaters are designated historic landmarks, which makes them very tricky to renovate, but it can be done. I just visited the Palace Theater. The seating, fabulous. The lobby, the exit situation, a disaster. Should have been thought through a little differently. So hopefully with our next renovation, we will reconsider this. But the seats are better. The Hudson Theater renovated seats, we love. So it can be done, but your average Broadway theater has very uncomfortable seats, and that was the number 1 issue of these 500 survey respondents. Folks cited that they are tight, uncomfortable seats, and also aisle accessibility is a nightmare. Also the quality of seating for the price. My pervasive feeling is that we are underestimating that. This is a hunch. No one has ever explicitly said this to me. The vibe that I get sometimes and this is literally not from anyone in particular, just like a general vibe, is that Broadway feels like, because it's Broadway and because it's a luxury product, people will come. And I think that what we're experiencing right now is that that's not always the case. If the experience is uncomfortable, folks are less likely to return. Every time you go sit your tush in a really uncomfortable seat and you like smoosh your elbows in like this so that you're not touching the neighbor next to you, and your knees are really cramped, and then you have to crawl over like 50 people to get to the bathroom at intermission, and by the time you get there, the bathrooms that don't accommodate nearly enough people, you're waiting in line for 30 minutes, and then you're late getting into Act 2, plus you didn't get your $40 drink from concessions. You know what I'm saying? I think that we're underestimating how much work needs to be done there. There's a number of things that we can do without renovating the theater, but renovating the theaters are sort of at the root of the issue. Broadway is a real estate game. Theaters, obviously, this is incredibly expensive to do. I do wish that more had been done during the pandemic. It's one of those things that, like, during the pandemic, like, I had done a Broadway fellowship, but I wasn't, like, actively working on Broadway right before shutdown. And it was one of those things that, like, I thought it would clarify later on why we didn't use that time to renovate our theaters. It's still unclear to me. So if you have a magical answer, besides that they're designated historic landmarks, and that it's expensive, please comment it below. Okay, so number 1 is seating. Number 2 issue, audience behavior was the second most cited issue. So folks said behavior has gotten much worse after shutdown. There's a big sense of entitlement. You know, people are singing along, speaking on their phones, etc. And then it's interesting because later on we're going to talk about how customer service has been cited as an issue, and that ushers can be incredibly rude. And it's like, if they're dealing with audiences that are more unruly than they used to be, it's like, you know, there's a cycle there. What is the fix for this? Is it a house announcement that's a little more explicit before the show, not just like, please turn off your devices, you know, it's super distracting to the performers, you know, we ask you not to talk during the show? I don't freaking know. Is there a funny way to do it in the style of the show? Is like, what, you know, now when you're opening your playbills, it's like, there's a page of like, this is how you're expected to act in the theater. And as I am wanting to bring in new audiences, I want folks to understand what is theater etiquette, and I don't want to dampen people's experience. And I think that where it is tricky is when someone's joyful experience negatively impacts their neighbor. I do think it's delicate, and I never want to rain on anyone's parade. And I don't necessarily know what the answer is, and therefore I would love to open up a discussion. And also, if I haven't already made that disclaimer, I am not here to pontificate as though I have all of the answers. I'm really, really interested in starting a discussion, and then I live for that comment section, and we can start a dialogue that will hopefully also blossom into a dialogue within the broader community so that it might actually affect some change. I would love to know if you have any thoughts here about, like, A, how much out loud enjoyment is too much out loud enjoyment, and B, how can we articulate to new audiences what theater etiquette is? Because sometimes people aren't used to going to Broadway shows, and they're used to going to a concert where you can be much louder and you can fill the stage. And I don't want to shun our audiences, because if you go and you're shamed for something, then they're not going to return, and we want those audiences, and frankly, we need them. So it's like, what is it a pre-show email that's like actually enticing and offering them something in advance? And also, this is what's expected of you at the theater. I don't know. Very open to suggestions here. Let's move on to number 3. Who's surprised about this? The cost. This wasn't even really what I was looking for in the survey response in terms of just like, in terms of the experience, but someone specifically said, thinking you're going to rush a show, but that all that is left are the $175 plus tickets. Yeah, I mean, Broadway prices are just incredibly exorbitant. Again, $168 is average Broadway ticket price, including fees, and that's just a ton of money. So that's tough. Okay, we've already talked about cost in other videos. I will link them up here. We unpack it there. Let's move on to more parts of the experience. Number 4, restrooms. Boy, this came up a lot. Folks cited that they are gendered. There's not very many genderqueer restrooms, and also there are not enough stalls and the lines are ridiculous. I found the process of going to cabaret so incredibly stressful, partially for this reason. I love the idea of immersive theater. I liked the experience pre-show better in London than I liked it on Broadway. I mean, it's beautiful on Broadway, but I was so stressed out. It was like sardines. People didn't know where they were going. I love that they themed the Dom and Herren signs into the restroom in German, however, People were very confused about what restroom it is that they were in, and while I don't really have a problem with whoever wants to go to whatever restroom, there were some very confused looking people bouncing in and out of the restrooms. I just find the process of getting into the theater, all of the queuing in a theater is so incredibly stressful. And part of it is because there's such a concentrated time to do it. And part of that is because of unions and labor and all these things. So it's like opening house at a half hour, which only gives you a concentrated amount of time to get all those butts in seats, scanning tickets and doing security and doing all the things. So it's just like high stress. And intermission is like high stress. I went to Sojo Spa recently, which 100 out of 10 recommend. Exceeded all expectations if you live near New York. It's fabulous. The queue experience, the way everything had been thought out was like a theme park. And I just wish, I don't know what the answers are because our lobbies are the size of our lobbies, but getting into a theater is a nightmare. It's a noctmare. And like bathroom lines are a noctmare. And the answer for that is a renovation and more stalls and those wonderful, here's something I loved at Cabaret, is they had the green and red lights above the stalls so you could see what was empty and you don't have to do the upward peekaboo to see if there's feet under the stalls. Love that part. Anyway, let's move forward. Okay, number 5, congestion. So people are specifically talking about congestion like in Schubert Alley, in the theater district around showtime. So someone suggested that we have staggered start times. Someone else was upset by the lack of lobbies, and a number of people just cited dealing with Times Square. Yeah, it's just such a nightmare. It's just such a nightmare. I don't know the answer, although I will say I genuinely love unconventional start times. I love Rogue Thursday matinees. Thank you, Ken Davenport. And Gatsby. I love unconventional start times. I love not dealing with that situation. But yeah, congestion is absolutely an issue. Okay, moving on. Accessibility we've discussed in other videos. I'll link it up here, but folks specifically cited a lack of elevators and getting in and out with a wheelchair is an absolute nightmare. Again, renovation, and please do it with accessibility in mind, but it is really, that's so tough. And customer service. So folks were saying there's an inability to change reservations like tickets, which I've also experienced, and it's incredibly frustrating, especially when you're spending so much money on tickets. And then also dealing with rude ushers. But as I noted, it's probably because they're dealing with asshole audiences. And you may not be an asshole, but the person before you may have been. In this survey series, it's important to note that I'm not just talking about like, here are all the things that suck about the Broadway experience. Some of these videos are also my next one is gonna be what's working with the Broadway experience and how do we capitalize it and how do we use it to fight some of the issues that we're currently dealing with on the negative side. With that in mind, as these are some of our big pain points in the Broadway experience, I would love to know what you think. What are your biggest frustrations with the Broadway going experience? And then also, what do you think about how we can fix any of these other than just like, please theater owners spend millions of dollars and shut down and the loss of revenue to renovate the theaters, which hopefully we're slowly doing one at a time, but like, that's it. Friends, thank you so much for watching this video. As always, it genuinely is so helpful if you like, comment, and subscribe. It's the surest way to let the YouTube algorithm know what wonderful people to push this video out to, people just like yourself. I invite you to follow me on Instagram for the surveys and TikTok @itsKatharine Quinn. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the comment section. Bye.